Hi everyone, this is a tutorial about the accounting entries for accounts receivable control and accounts payable control. Accounts receivable is an asset and therefore all items resulting in an increase in accounts receivable such as credit sales should be debited to the account, and all items resulting in a decrease to accounts receivable such as receipts from debtors should be credited to the account. On the other hand, we have accounts payable, which is a liability. Liabilities should be credited when they increase and debited when they decrease. Credit purchases would increase accounts payable and should thus be credited to the accounts payable control account, and payments made to creditors will decrease the liability and should thus be debited to the accounts payable control account. Let's have a look at a comprehensive example. Please pause to read the information available. Now the first step is to record the balances. In note number 1, we are given debit balances and credit balances. The debit balances must be recorded on the debit side of the accounts, and the credit balances should be recorded on the credit side of the accounts. For receivables, we will therefore have a debit balance brought down of 20,520 Rand. For payables, we will have a debit balance brought down of 1,026 Rand. Receivables will also have a credit balance brought down of 1,026 Rand, and payables will have a credit balance of 12,135. There's no entry for allowance for bad debts. That balance should be recorded in the allowance for bad debts account. Since that account is not required, we will simply ignore it and make no entry thereof. The next step is to record the totals of the subsidiary journals. The first journal is the purchases journal. In the purchases journal, we will find credit purchases, and therefore it should be recorded to the accounts payables account. Credit purchases increases accounts payable, so therefore it should be recorded on the credit side of accounts payable. If VAT is applicable, we have to write purchases and VAT. VAT is an inclusive amount, it's therefore included in the 15,390. Please do not calculate VAT separately unless it is told that the amount excludes VAT. Purchases returns decreases accounts payable. It should therefore go onto the debit side of accounts payable. This would be goods returned to the supplier, and therefore the debt to the supplier decreases. Again, if VAT is applicable, you have to write purchases returns and VAT. The sales journal represents all sales made on credit. It therefore increases the amount receivable from debtors and should be recorded on the debit side of accounts receivable. If VAT is applicable, you'll have to write sales and VAT. Once again, VAT is an inclusive amount. It would be included in the 25,650 Rand. Sales returns represent all returns made by the debtor. It therefore decreases what the debtor owes, so therefore it should go onto the credit side of accounts receivable. The receivables column in the cash receipts journal will be the total amount received from accounts receivables or debtors. There's therefore a decrease in the amount owed by them, and therefore it should be recorded on the credit side of accounts receivable. The sales column in the cash receipts journal, that amount would represent all cash sales. Cash sales should not be recorded in accounts receivable, only credit sales. So credit sales we record in the sales journal. Cash sales we record in the cash receipts journal. There is no entry in accounts receivable for cash sales. The payables column in the cash payments journal represents all amounts paid to of suppliers or creditors. There's therefore a decrease in the amount owed to payables, and therefore it should go onto the debit side of accounts payable. The receivables column in the cash payments journal represents payments made to debtors. This can be as a result of an overpayment received from them. It's therefore a refund. It should go onto the debit side of accounts receivable. Amounts paid by them goes onto the credit side, and amounts refunded to them goes onto the debit side. Purchases in cash payments journal represents all purchases made on a cash basis. There's therefore no entry, since only credit purchases increases accounts payable. Credit purchases are recorded in the purchases journal. Cash purchases are recorded in the cash payments journal. There's no entry for cash purchases in accounts payable. The next step is to record your sundry journal debits and sundry journal credits. All journal debits must go onto the debit side of the accounts. All journal credits must go onto the credit side of the accounts. Receivables should therefore be debited by 7,695 and payables debited by 720. Receivables must be credited by 1,890 and payables credited by 2,310. The last note is in respect of bad debt, which is not included in note number 4. Bad debt is amounts that's irrecoverable. It should therefore be removed from accounts receivable, since you're not going to receive it. To decrease accounts receivable, we should credit it. The amount of 650 should therefore be recorded on the credit side of accounts receivable. If VAT is applicable, you'll have to write bad debt and VAT. The last step would be to balance the accounts receivable account as well as the accounts payable account. First, let's look at accounts receivable. We add up the debit side, and this totals to 54,585. That total will take over to the credit side. The balance would be on the credit side, since the total of the credit side is lower than the total of the debit side. To get to the balance recorded on the credit side, we'll take the total of 54,585 and subtract all amounts on the credit side. This will give us a balance of 14,048 Rand. Now for accounts payable. We add up the credit side, and that totals to 29,835. we take that total over to the debit side. And then to get the balance carried forward on the debit side, we will have to subtract all amounts on the debit side from the total of 29,835. This will give us 5,426. That is the amount that is still owed to accounts payables. While the amount of 14,048 Rand, which is the balance carried forward for accounts receivable, is the amount that is still receivable from debtors.